Welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all aspects of our sport in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Today on the podcast, I'm lucky enough to be sitting down with fellow Aussie and fellow podcaster and fellow bike industry worker, among other things, Jarrad Connolly. So super stoked to be here. We've just been for a lap out on Mount Seymour. And now it's time to sit down and pick Jarrad's brains. Jarrad has a really diverse experience within the world of mountain biking. He is currently the sales manager at Steed Cycles, a local shop here on the North Shore, and he also hosts the Steed Cycles Podcast, so definitely another good one to go and check out there. Among that, Jarrad is also a racer, a mountain bike coach, and an avid enthusiast that loves all things bikes. He has a real emphasis on keeping it fun rather than solely relying on fancy equipment. So I'm super excited to pick his brains. Jarrad, what did I miss there?
I don't know, I think you got it pretty good. It's one of the best intros I think I've ever had.
It's a pleasure.
I'm keen to get into it.
Let's take it right back to the start. One thing I didn't mention there, you're originally from Newcastle on the central coast of Australia.
Yep.
Let's talk about your childhood. I know you bikes from an early age.
Yeah, so I think I got my first bike when I was around 2 years old. And it was before like the walking bikes or the pre-bikes. So it's like you had the tricycle, and then from there got onto the training wheels, and pretty quickly off the training wheels. And I think we started racing BMX when I was about 4 years old.
Wow, there you go.
I was one of those little kids that you see riding around and like struggling to get over the jumps, and dad chasing me down the track. and then I think I was about 5 or 6 and I got my first motorcycle.
Man, that's fantastic. Just pausing it there, like starting out as a kid, did it all come easily to you? Was it all just fun, or do you remember challenges back then?
I don't know. I think it was pretty fun. I was like, where we grew up, we were pretty lucky. We grew up in a cul-de-sac, which I think is a Canadian term as well.
I think so, yeah. We used to call them courts.
Yeah, exactly. Like just a dead-end street, and across the road there was another family. So I have 2 younger brothers. Across the road there was a family with like 4 kids and 3 boys, and all very similar ages. They grew up racing BMX at quite a high level, so it was always a competition on the street. And then over the years of growing up, there was multiple families in and out, so pretty much every day after school it was a bike race on the street of some description, or for Christmas we're getting shovels. But yeah, I think like overall I don't really remember any sort of major issues, I don't know. I don't think there was any challenges as such. It was more just fun.
Totally, yeah. It sounds like you're just embracing the sport, kind of, getting at anything you could. So then you got a motorcycle when you were 6? Yeah,
so Dad was a big motorcycle fan and motorsport fan, and I guess that's what drew us in that direction. And got a little 50cc bike and sort of jumped into that, and sort of started racing a couple of years after that, and sort of gave away the BMX racing to race motorcycles. And it was just all in at that point. And 2 brothers and dad racing, and then mum being in the like canteen and the score tower, and it was all in every weekend just about. So.
Yeah, what a fantastic way to grow up.
Yeah.
That's right, and we were chatting about it on our ride there, like such a fantastic base to have now that you're a mountain biker.
Yeah, definitely, and I think like you see that a lot. Like a perfect example is Aaron Gwynn, obviously coming from a fairly high level motocross background as a kid and transferring over to the mountain bikes. Totally. But you see it in both directions now. There's a lot of motorcycle racers going back to cycling to race, and
for sure, so much crossover there and so much we can learn from each different sport.
Definitely.
That's right. And then like fast forward to today, you live in here on the North Shore. You've also been here for around 4 or 5 years, I believe.
Yeah, it'll be I think it's 5 years in August now. So
Man, that's fantastic.
yeah.
And was it mountain biking that first drew you here?
Yeah, pretty much. I think like I got to the point on the Central Coast of sort of feeling the ceiling a little bit, and got to the point with racing and being competitive of not wanting to sort of give it up as such, but to take a step back and focus more on coaching and just enjoying riding. So I moved over here when I was 28, and just sort of wanted to take it a little bit more easy, and obviously being so close to Whistler and then the legend of the North Shore.
Oh yeah.
That really drew me here, and from that point it's just taken off. It's crazy.
It's so cool, man. Yeah, so many good reasons to move here and even more reasons to stay here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. Like the whole goal originally was to be here for 2 years and go back to Australia and see what happened. But before the 2 years was up, I sort of knew I needed to stay for a lot longer and go from there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like we were saying when we first met a couple of months ago, there's so many parallels between your story and mine.
Yeah, because you're over here pretty similar time.
Exactly, similar timing, and yeah, you're even talking there about like, oh, before my work visa was even up, I started applying for permanent residency. It was exactly the same for me. Man, that's awesome. And you mentioned there kind of, back on the Central Coast, doing lots of racing, maybe wanting to take a bit of a step back and get further into the coaching. Let's chat a little bit about your coaching history down there.
Yeah, so I think I've always been one to want to share my knowledge with anybody that will listen, I guess is the best way to describe it. So like within the group of people I grew up racing with, I had a lot of really good coaches racing motorcycles. I even like attributed some of it to like my own dad. He's a really good sort of leader and instructor and things. So there's a lot of that, and then a couple of friends needed some help with different bits and pieces, so started like just openly coaching them without any sort of formal training or just going off my own knowledge. And then they sort of pushed me into getting the accreditations and getting like further, I guess, into the business side of things. And yeah, it slowly progressed from being just like a friend that would offer advice when asked, and then to the point where I linked up with the local club, and they really helped me get all my accreditations through Cycling Australia, and it just grew to the point where I could have almost gone full time as a coach.
Wow.
But it was never consistent enough. But definitely paved the way for a lot of racing. Is kind of a side good thing from it, is that as everyone knows, unless you're a top 5 guy in the world, you're not really making much money off it. So to have that side hustle of like mountain biking and teaching, and that, it kind of went hand in hand with the racing as well. So,
totally, such a good synergy there, and it's so cool to hear that it just kind of developed organically alongside your racing, alongside your passion for giving back.
So yeah, it was really good in that sense.
Man, that's rad. And were you mainly kind of coaching kids that were up and coming in the racing scene, or was it, just beginner riders?
To be honest, everybody. I had a couple of kids that were like, everyone from, I'm trying to think now, like kids all the way through from 12, 13-year-olds. I had a couple of like national BMX champs. I had a couple of sort of elite level races, which was always very interesting with those guys and girls, I should say, just because a lot of the time I would be racing against them, and days and months leading up to it, I would be trying to get them to go as fast as they could go. But then on the day of, I would have to be like competitor as well as coach. So there was always this weird balance of like, I need to give them every chance that they can be to be the best. And if I find a fast line or a fast technique down a certain section of trail, I would share it with them. But then that would also be like counterintuitive of like working of like in my own results.
Yeah.
So that's where the balance started to change, was when I worked out that like I could do that and not feel, I guess, bad for sharing my own knowledge, and I guess like making everyone the best that they could be, and then all the way through to some older generation and things like that. So it's pretty good.
Man, that's such an interesting dynamic. Like, coaching your competition.
Yeah, literally.
But I love that. It's such like an open and healthy way of sharing. I think almost like seeing them as teammates rather than competition.
Yeah, and that's definitely the way it sort of played out. And I don't know. I always feel like with a race like that, any sort of timed event, you're racing the clock at the end of the day. So if you can make someone else better, then it's not really going to affect your result. It's not like they're going to come and take you out in a turn or something like that. They're not going to affect your overall race. So it sort of...
Totally. Focus on what you can do to be the fastest racer.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If you can bring other people up along the way, that's great.
Yeah, exactly right.
And that's fantastic. So you're there, giving your students line choices, kind of giving them loads of information, loads of tips. I'm curious, is there one thing that comes to mind when I ask you, have you ever learned anything from a student?
Yes. There's definitely been a lot. The one that pops into mind, and I'm still playing with the idea, and the technique is whether your feet stay level in a turn or whether you drop your outside foot. And I think the old school way of doing it for many years has always been drop the outside foot to weight the outside of the bike and give the tyres grip. But the new modern, and I'd say in the last 2+ years, there's been a lot of sort of more modern coaches and modern riding style of keeping your feet level 100% of the time. And it's not that I disagree with it, because I definitely ride that way in some situations, but some people are coaching like never drop your feet. And it's just a very interesting concept of that. So like something like that I've learned and now trying to work out how to break down and train and teach. But then like in general, just having to break down a skill, no matter how simple the skill is, the more you break it down, the more you understand it, the better you can ride. So like my favorite one is telling people to breathe. And even last night we're at the jump park at Burnaby with all the DEVO kids, and one of the kids was coming through and you could see him just like tensing his jaw. And I'm like, he came up and he's like, oh, what do you think? I'm like, dude, you need to like slow down. I want you to go to the top and sing a song. I was like, whether it's out loud or in your head, sing a song. And it's like, because the rhythm of you singing a song will make you breathe. And then he went through and obviously he was singing a song because you could see him nodding his head. And he come back up and I was like, oh, what were you singing? He's like, I couldn't think of anything. So I started singing the ABCs. And I'm like, hey, if that's what worked, that's what worked. And like little things like that you pick up, and it may not be a flaw of your own, but it changes your riding style because you're seeing other people's mistakes or other people's whatever you want to call it, and working with that to make yourself better as well.
Totally. Yeah, so much good wisdom there. I'd love to unpack that. But yeah, I love the one about the breathing. I know I've certainly experienced that in my own riding where, a friend has said to me, Jake, your face is so red when I've got to the bottom of something I find challenging. I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I wasn't breathing today. And it's like, that's why I was riding like crap. That's why I was scared. As soon as you start, doing something to bring you back to the present, whether it be just simply a breathing technique at the top or singing a song, everything starts to improve from there. Yeah,
and it's, as I say, it's like, not all of the ideas are my own, but you hear different things from different coaches and different people. And as I say, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of coaching growing up, which I think has definitely helped my own form of coaching or style of coaching.
Totally.
But yeah, it's just like you just build on experience after experience and slowly work with that.
Exactly. Yeah, it just keeps getting better and better. And speaking of mentors of your own, I know another question I've been wanting to ask you. Is there any like one bit of advice that stuck with you to this day that you were given by a mentor?
There's been a lot, and I've been trying to think about this like since we spoke a while back, and I don't know if there's any one piece of advice. Sort of one of my favorite ones is like, you can only control what you control, and what you can't control, let the cards fall how they fall. So it's sort of like, if you can prepare everything in as far advance as you can get, and I've written like blog posts and all sorts of things about this, and it's always like, set out a plan of like what you need to do, how far out it needs to be, whether it's like taking your bike to the shop to get serviced a month in advance, or like getting certain items, or going to the shops to buy all of your food, or if you need to prep food, or whatever it is. Like, literally don't leave anything to the last minute, and then that way you are the most prepared you can be. Even like we were talking earlier about the fiver, for instance.
Yeah.
So we've got a fiver tonight.
So it's a local race here on the North Shore. A bit of a fun social one. But,
so like I tell
get a little competitive.
Yeah, but I like tell everyone it's a $5 burger and beer with a free race.
Exactly.
To give an idea of how low key this race is. But they release the course. It's an enduro race. They release the course 2 days in advance or something along those lines. I went and rode the course yesterday morning just to sort of pre-ride the course. And I kind of got a bit of slack from that from a few different people. And I was like, well, I'm going there to throw myself down the mountain as fast as I can go, whether it's a low key or a high key race. And I want to be as safe as possible. So I don't want to come around the corner in the red zone and all of a sudden there's an exposed rock that wasn't there 2 weeks ago that I've forgotten about. So it's sort of being prepared in that sense is massive. And then at the end of the day, if you get a flat tire or something out of your control, then so be it. Like, it's going to happen, and you can't be upset by that as long as you've done everything you can to execute that. So
totally, yeah, almost like removing as many of the unknowns as possible.
Yeah.
So that we can just focus on the task at hand, and we're not there guessing about like, oh, what's this corner like coming up ahead? What's that feature like? Oh man, it's dustier than I thought today. All of these things.
Yeah, so I think like, sure, like we ride these trails all the time, and as we say, it's like a very low stressful, low issue race, but there's also a safety factor involved in that, and being comfortable, and at the end of the day, everyone's there to go as good as they can go.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that turns up to pay for a race that doesn't want to do well. And anybody that says that, I think, is lying.
Totally, yeah. You can make a race as low key as you want, but it's still a race.
Yeah,
the concept is still like go fast from A to B.
Yeah, like if you said to me, I'll race you to that tree, I'm going to run as fast as I can run to beat you. Like, and I know people talk about not being competitive, but we're all human. Yeah. We all want to do the best we can do.
Yeah, I think if you signed up for that race, you may not be like competitive as in like, I want to beat you today, Jarrad.
Yeah.
But I might be like, I want to go a little bit faster than I usually go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing, like I've learned, I guess, from different people, is like a win may be a 5th place, or it may be a 30th place, or it may be just PBing your time is a win at the end of the day. Or even just completing the race. So there's so many different ways to look at what an actual win is, as long as it's such a personal thing.
Totally.
So, yeah.
And how do you say like your mindset differs? Like we just went for just a really fun casual ride there. It was pretty relaxed.
Yeah.
How would you say your mindset differs when you do go into that competition zone?
I think over the years it's changed a lot. But I think like, how do I explain it? Like, with a competition, it's always obviously you want to be as focused and as calm as possible, and you want to try and line up as many things, and going back to what I just said then, is like being as prepared as possible. Like if I turned up today and for whatever reason I forgot my knee pads or whatever it is, like as long as I can still wear a helmet and ride my bike, I'm going to go ride my bike.
Totally.
If I just may not ride as fast is the thing, or take as many risks. But if I turned up to a race and I'm like, I need certain things to make myself feel comfortable, then that's like those preparation points. But it also depends on the race as well. So like the fiver tonight, pretty casual. Once again, like if something happens where I may get, I don't know, whatever, like knock on wood, a flat tire, or I fall or something like that, I'm not going to be too bummed about it. Yeah. But if I went and spent $200 on an entry to like a national level race, there's going to be a lot more preparation. There's going to be more bike preparation. There's going to be all of this. So there's maybe the day of is less of a change, but the preparation before, mindset-wise, is different.
So more preparation depending on how much you care about that race.
Exactly, and even like right down to the way I eat food, or what I had for dinner the night before, if I have a beer the night before, or, you know, like, there's all of that I think changes on the level of the stress of the race, I guess.
For sure, yeah, that's great. And maybe for people listening here, and even for myself, I don't know too much about your racing history, but I'd love to dial things back a little bit. I know you were racing from a young age, doing motocross, and then got right into mountain bike racing back on the central coast of Australia there.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Is there any highlights, any favourite races you did down there?
Yeah, so I sort of like grew up racing motorcycles and got to a fairly competitive point with that. And then unfortunately, just as I was about to turn like what they class as senior, or go into the open sort of age group, which is going from 16 to 17, I crashed racing in a stadium in supercross racing. And dislocated my hip. And like I always rode bicycles while racing motorcycles. And then from that point, started training again on a mountain bike. Realized how accessible mountain biking was comparative to motorcycle racing.
So mountain biking was a bit of like a rehab thing for the hip injury.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that sort of transition started. And then got invited out. I was on a dirt jump bike, essentially, like to start with, and got invited out to a downhill race and did fairly well, and then slowly progressed onto a dual suspension and then into downhill bikes and things. And so I did that for quite a few years, and I'd say I was sort of like a top 25, sort of between 25th and sort of maybe, not quite top 15, but like outside of that top 15 area. In Australia. And then it just got to the point where I was in the gym multiple times a week, doing shuttles or push runs multiple times a week, and then riding on the weekend, and like doing everything I could physically do to be the best I could be, and never really breaking that next level. And then slowly progressed over into the marathon cross-country side, started hanging out with more people that were doing that, and kind of got convinced to come on a couple of rides, and realised the effort I was putting into the downhill, I could be quite a good marathon cross-country guy. And I think at that stage I had a lot of mental strength from that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So having the background of the motocross and the downhill racing, so having a really solid skill set.
Yeah.
And then going and pushing on like an endurance circuit or a cross-country circuit.
Yeah, and I think like my skill sets as a technique-wise, racing cross-country, I very rarely would ride above maybe 80% of like a skill technique-wise. And obviously it's different because you're riding a much smaller suspension bike, and the endurance aspect changes that a lot. But I felt like I could get to a lot of races and ride anything on a cross-country track without really thinking too hard, which I think helped a lot in that, because I could relax mentally and then focus on like just pushing through that pain of the endurance. So, and
the mental strength there, was that something you had to like consciously nurture and work on as you were doing your training, or was that something that kind of came naturally to you?
So I think, anybody that's training as much as we were training, like, should be training on their mental side of things. And I see a lot of people where they're talking about certain power numbers or what calories they're eating or anything like that. And I'm like, that's all good and well until you get to the race and you're completely brain fried because you, haven't worked on something in particular, and then you're worried about this number or whatever. And I've seen it many times, like even some of my really good friends, like we would be sitting at the top of a downhill run at a national level race, and we'd be in the finals and both qualified fairly well. Like, as I say, a lot of the time, top 25, top 20 qualifying in Australia, and they'd be sitting up there and I'd be sitting there just like chilling and talking to people and things like that. And then they'd be in the corner just like playing and tearing up leaves because they're so worried about this 3-minute run. And it's like working on that mental aspect and that strength and being able to stay calm and comfortable in that position. Yeah, like I think I definitely worked on it a lot to be able to get to that point though.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? Like that mental aspect allows us to use all the physical training and all of the skills we've developed over the years. But it's a tricky one, you know, because it is up in the abstract. Like I think a lot of people get stuck with the like, okay, like I understand it's important to train some mental skills to train my mind, but how do I do that? So I'm curious for you, like how did that play out?
So we did, one of my favorite things that we did, and whether it was mental training or whatever, but it was a really interesting one that when I was working with my personal trainer with the downhill side of things, I always wore a heart rate monitor, and I was one of the only guys I know of at the time wearing a heart rate monitor. It was sort of 2010 to somewhere in that area. And when we were in the gym, one of the things we did was get on a stationary bike, start warming up and doing all the rest of the activities. But for a downhill run, like I would average sort of 180 heart rate for 3 minutes and then max out at like just over 200 or around the 200 mark is where I'd max out a lot of the time. So when your heart rate's at that height, you're not getting much oxygen to the brain. And then going back to being in the gym, we sort of controlled the environment. So being on a spin bike, all of that would get my heart rate up to where that 180 to 185. And then he'd show me a piece of paper where he'd written a combination of letters, or he might have drawn like a trail with a rock and a tree or something. Okay. And then he'd show me the thing for 5 seconds. I'd have to look at it, and then he'd hide it, and then I'd sprint for maybe 30 seconds. So my heart rate would max out. Yeah. And then he would ask me questions while I'm sprinting to then force me to think about things. So he might be like, what was the third letter on the second line? And then I'd have to think about what was on the paper while still sprinting at my max to build that sort of ability to think at a high level of heart rate.
Yeah. That's a really, really interesting technique.
Yeah, and I don't know, there'd be a lot of people that may be laughing and sitting back and being sort of like, I don't know if that's the right way to do things as experts in that field. And I don't know, I think it worked for me, but
for me, it makes sense. I think there's no right or wrong. It's just like you're talking about different pedal positions in corners before. I don't think either of one of those is right, neither one of those is wrong. It's also dependent on the corner, and same with the mental stuff. It's dependent on you. Like, how's your brain work, and what are you actually trying to achieve? But it makes sense. Like, so often, you know, we can visualize the trail so much in our mind beforehand. We can do breathing exercises while we're sitting on the couch and our heart rate's at rest in.
Yeah.
But how well does our brain work when we're mentally and physically fatigued at the bottom of a downhill run?
Yeah. So we decided to test that. So like perfect thing is like what was it? It was like 190. I could think clearly and say, like, you'd ask me a bunch of questions and we could talk like this within reason, obviously breathing pretty hard, but still talk pretty comfortably. 195, I couldn't remember. Was it my phone number? I think I couldn't remember my phone number, and I'd had that for like 10 years at that point. So I couldn't even remember that. And then at almost 200, I couldn't remember the house number that I grew up in. And at that point, I was still living there. And the number was 12. So I couldn't even remember that at 200.
Right.
And then at just over 200, I think they call it white out, which is where you don't get enough blood and oxygen to your brain. And then you sort of essentially pass out. And then you come to quite quickly, obviously, as soon as you start or you stop exercising. And I sort of woke up and he had his hands holding my shoulders, and luckily enough, the bike that we had a freewheel on it, so I didn't get thrown over the bars like you would on some of the bikes. But it was a really interesting test to be like, how far can we push my heart rate before I can't make like obvious conversational decisions? And that gave us a really good sort of limit of how hard I needed to push, and almost a mental, okay, I can push to this point before it becomes dangerous to ride a mountain bike as fast as you can ride it. And then when you then transfer that back to the trail, I knew when I was getting close to that limit. So there was a trail or a track very locally that had probably a 20-second sprint, and you would enter the sprint at 50 kilometers an hour off quite a fast run in, and then literally do the Mick Hanna speed tuck and pedal. And at the end of it, like, my heart rate was in the high 190s. And then you're going from that back into steep single track. And then you got to like take a deep breath, refocus, and go all at whatever speed we're doing. So there's a lot of that I think when you talk mentally, it's still a physical thing that you're trying to control.
Yeah, that's such a good metric there, having that. And I think, like you touched on there, such a good way of showing how intertwined both our mental state and our physical state is.
Yeah.
So, you know, often we're doing, you know, hill sprints and we're doing our training in the gym, we think we're training ourselves physically. But in an essence too, if we can get fitter and you can have maybe a 10 beats lower heart rate per second or per minute, on a race run, your brain's actually going to work better as well. You're going to be sharper.
Yeah, and one of my favorite sayings on things like that is, it's like, this is a character building ride. And it's like, you're going through a world of hurt, you're just hating life, and you get to the end of the ride and it's like a type 2 fun, and you get to the end, you're like, oh, I did that. I know I can do that now. And then from then on, like, it becomes easier to do that same thing.
Totally, yeah.
So.
I like that saying. And what I like as well is, like, just how much character does one need?
Yeah.
I often say that to myself when I get myself into situations I didn't intend to be in, out on a long day out in the saddle. And it kind of leads right into something we were chatting about on our ride then. We're talking about this idea of having like a dark spot in a race.
Yeah.
Speak on, like, what does that mean for you?
So I guess, like, when I was doing a lot of the marathon racing, and I did a lot of 7 and 12 hour solo events, and even a couple of like team 24-hour events and things like that, you would get to a point throughout the race where you just were in a bad place mentally. Never ever, like, I don't know, you might hear people talk about how they're like wanting to ride off the side of the trail and just disappear for a little while. And luckily I never let myself do that, but you have those thoughts, and you hear about people just like being overwhelmed with emotion. And I would always apologize if we're doing a lapped event. So there was a lot of races I did that it was it might have been a 45-minute-ish lap, and you'd race for 7 hours. So you'd see your pits, I don't know, up to 12, 13 times or something like that. And I'd always apologize to the people that were feeding me at the time. I'm like, at some point in the next 7 hours, I'm going to come through absolutely angry. And I'm like, I may say something and I promise I don't mean it. And it's like, there's been so many times where it's like that. And once again, like, you go through them so many times, and then I think those dark stages get shorter and shorter and shorter. And you know that as long as you continuously move forwards, that it gets better. And I think that, like, relates back to my personal life now, that if I'm struggling with something in life, I just have to get that one next step. Totally. And as soon as I get to that next step, I just need to take one more step. And eventually, as long as I've got the focus on getting back to being a good situation, it's going to happen.
Totally. Yeah, that's some really good insight there. And it reminds me of something one of my mentors told me. You know, I said one day, like, I just feel like I'm going around in circles, like the same problems over and over again, or maybe the same crash over and over again. And he said, no, like, it's a spiral, not a circle. So like you say there, each time you might experience a similar problem, or you might have a similar thing happen, but it's going to be smaller, or it's going to be easier to work through because you now have experience. Yeah,
I remember one time I was sitting, I think I was second in the race at this point, and it was right on that 7 hour mark. And if anyone knows how these races work, it's sort of like you race to 7 hours and then you finish that lap. And it wasn't quite at 7 hours, it was just before. And I knew if I pulled out, I was going to get third, but if I continued to finish the lap, I was going to get second. And I just crossed the start finish and pulled up at the pits, and my legs were cramping so bad that I couldn't physically stand up, but I could pedal because I could put all my weight on the saddle and just like turn the pedals over. And anyway, I like climbed off the bike, and I had a wooden rolling pin that you'd see in a kitchen, and I'd literally roll out my quads. So as I'm coming in, I'm like, I need the rolling pin. So one of the guys was handing me the rolling pin, and as I stood off the bike, I literally collapsed, and I was super lucky that my dad was standing behind me and caught me under my armpits. And he just like held me. He's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, literally put me back on the bike. I'm like, physically lift me up and put me on the bike. And he's like, you sure? And I'm like, yes. Put me on the bike because I can pedal. And he's like, all right. And he like lifts me up. And at this point I was like 155 pounds. So I weighed not much. And he just like lifts me up, sat me back on the pedal, handed me a bottle of ice water. And I just like rode for the next half an hour around. And it's like those sort of things that you just mentally have to go through. And I completely agree. Like there was many times before that I just couldn't do that. So yeah, the spiral thing is such a good like way of describing it. I never thought of that.
Totally. Yeah, I'm a visual guy, so that one really resonated with me. I was like, yeah, I can see that. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure. Another thing I wanted to touch on here, you talked about the idea before of, being in a race run. Maybe we've got extended hard bits of trail. We might have a steep bit into a rooty bit, into a rock roll, into a chute. I know something I struggle with, and a lot of the students I work with, is when we put them all together and there's not necessarily any easy bits to stop and catch your breath and refocus in between. How do you do that? Like, how do you refocus when you're out there on an extended, challenging bit of trail?
I don't really have an easy answer. I think it goes back
It's a hard question.
I think it goes back to breathing. Learning to breathe through technical trail. So, and as I say, like anybody that struggles with breathing through technical trail, and anybody that's done any coaching with me will know I get you to sing. And it's like, I don't care whether you're singing out loud or singing internally, but if you sing, it makes you breathe because of the rhythm of the song.
Totally.
Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Stars is a perfect song because the rhythm and the way, I don't understand music enough to really explain this too well.
Tempo.
But it's a tempo that like keeps your breathing quick enough that you don't sort of lose track of what you're doing. And it's almost like that lullaby that just like calms you down. And I think that's my biggest thing, is like to reset and refocus. And you only need one deep breath to refocus. When you think about it, it's sort of like, I can see from here, 20 meters forwards, there's a smooth bit of trail. I can go in through my nose, out through my mouth. I've reset. Let's attack again. And yeah, like we were talking about it, the race tonight is like 7D into John Deere, which I think is going to be probably close to a 7 to 8 minute stage for the faster guys. And it's like, if you're on the limit for that long with the amount of pedaling, you need to take a breath, or like learn to like release your arms, or like literally wiggle your fingers, or whatever it may be. Like just look for those sections of trail. And if you can pre-write it, that gives you those areas to know where you can do that.
Totally.
Yeah, like I remember, I think it was Nathan Rennie, if anyone remembers Nathan Rennie from way back in the day, him talking about how a bunch of guys were just cruising down the course and blowing up turns. And he's like, in practice, you need to go this section of trail as fast as you can ride, so you know what gear you're going to be in. Because if you don't know what gear you're going to be in, you're going to come out of a turn in the wrong gear, and all of a sudden either being too hard or too easy of a gear. So there's all these like preparation things that then allow you to do that.
Totally. Yeah. And I like that point now, like practice it how you're going to ride it in the race.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise you're almost practicing the wrong thing. You're practicing going slow.
Yeah. So like you hear of a lot of people and they like stop in the same points all the way down the trail in practice. And you get into the habit, and then you go put a full race run together, and all of a sudden 30 seconds into the trail, your first pit stops past you.
Yeah.
And then you get a minute and a half into the trail, and then your second pit stop passes you. And all of a sudden you're like, when am I going to stop?
Totally.
Versus if you randomly stop along the trail in different sections throughout practice, it gives you different ideas of the speed that you're traveling.
I see what you're saying. So you're not necessarily going out and doing continuous laps in
No,
your training.
not necessarily.
But you are continuously riding through every different section by mixing up your rest.
Yeah, exactly right.
I like that. It's a good tactic. And I wanted to go back there. We were talking about, taking breaths and ways of riding continuous hard trail. I'm curious, when you're practicing this or when you're practicing it with a student rider out there, are you going to the particular section of trail that's giving them issues, or are you kind of practicing breathing on other stuff first?
It depends on how advanced they are as a rider. Yeah, like I think if I've never coached or ridden with the person, I'll probably go to an easier section of trail and critique their technique first. So then when they get to the technical bit of trail, that technique is already correct. And they understand. So if we talk about like their pelvis position or their chin position or whatever it is, they've already got an idea of what we're talking about. So I don't have to talk them through a technical, scary bit of trail that they're worried about, plus correct their technique, plus correct their breathing, plus whatever else they're doing.
Yeah.
So I think taking it back to that green or blue trail or whatever is a comfortable level for them is a good thing. And like one of my favorite things to say to people when they first ride a section is, especially on some of the easier stuff that we're trying to work with technique, is like, do it at walking pace.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what's walking pace? I was like, well, it's different for everybody. Walking pace is whatever you feel comfortable doing, and you can then do everything at that same speed. So maybe like looking at where you need to be, breathing, there's like so many variables in there. But if you slow it down to walking pace, you can then do all of those properly versus doing it at flat out or running pace. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there on the other end of the scale when you're in a section of trail that's already taking up so much of your mental energy because it's challenging for you.
Yeah.
And then you try and think about changing your technique or doing something new, and it's like, it's just not going to happen. It's
No.
mental overload.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really, really sound technique there. And another thing I wanted to talk about with you is this idea of like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations as a way of mental training.
Yeah. So I think the reason like I really like that is I had a conversation with one of the guys at work and about anxiety, and he suffers sort of from like, I guess, social anxiety. I don't know enough about how all of that works, and I don't have a degree in any of this. So obviously it's all open advice more than actual fact. But it's sort of the way I describe it to people is put yourself in controlled, stressful situations. So then when you get to uncontrolled, stressful situations, you feel comfortable.
Totally.
And the way I describe that is like any competition is a controlled, stressful situation. So it may be a school test, whatever the thing is that makes you stress out, a race, whatever. But at any point you can pull out and there's very little complication. So as I say, like you may be going, I don't know, let's just pick a random thing, and it's like you've got a 100-kilometer race and you get 60 Ks in and you're like cramping, you're seeing stars. If you pull out, at the end of the day, it's going to have zero impact on the rest of your life. But you've understood how to push to that point. If you continue pushing through that and you succeed to get to that 100, then awesome. Like that's going to build that confidence within. It also gives you the idea of being able to like control your mental state and push through that mental state of being like, I really want to give up right now, and understand like that moving forwards. So then if you then flip that to like an uncontrolled, stressful situation, let's just say you get in a car crash. All of a sudden you've run up the back of somebody, heart rate's through the roof, adrenaline's going everywhere. The dude in the car in front of you is screaming at you. Your anxiety is obviously going to be pretty crazy at that point. Like, what's going to happen next? But if you've gone through all these other controlled stressful situations, you're like, okay, I just need to take a breath. If I stay calm, I can work through these next steps. And I know eventually the longer we get away from this immediate stressful thing, it's going to slowly work its way out.
Totally.
So there's that. And yeah, like I had that conversation with him, and I told him to go sit in the bathroom with all the lights off. So it was a dark room, and like pretty much zero out all of the senses. And then he came back out and he was much calmer, much more collected. And then that's where that conversation started. And it sort of, as I say, I don't have any formal education in it, but I feel like that's such a helpful thing for a lot of people.
I think it's cool to have the conversation on this level as well, and just normalize conversations. Anxiety, because it's something I think we all experience on some level.
For sure.
And I can relate to that, like in a biking sense. Often my biking will change, and my mental state while biking will change depending on who I'm riding with, or whether it's a race environment or just a casual ride with someone I really trust.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing, is it's like you may turn up and all of a sudden there's 5 professional level riders there, and you're like, wow, I don't think I can ride with these guys. But then you go and ride with them, and they're all chill dudes, and go from there.
And it's something I've spoken about on this podcast before, but it's something I've experienced, being lucky enough to ride with people from all walks of life. Quite often I'm riding with people that are up here compared to me. And that can elicit, some kind of like self-comparison and stuff going on in my head that I know is not the right take to it, but sometimes it can be hard to bring under control.
Yeah, and I think
you can get stuck in your head for sure.
One saying that I heard from the late Geordie Lunn is, go big or don't. And what he means by that is like, if you feel comfortable, sure, go send it, go do crazy stuff. Yeah. And that guy was insane. But if you turn up and you're like, I'm not really feeling it today, take the beeline, take the blue run, like enjoy it. Like you don't always have to be that level.
Yeah.
And that's where that same thing of like the controlled stressful situation, you could be dropping off a 10-foot drop, or you could ride around it. That's the control. You've got that choice.
Exactly. Yeah. You're the one pulling the reins. And I think that in itself is such a good way of alleviating some anxiety, being like, I have a choice. I don't have to ride this.
For sure.
And just reminding yourself at the end of the day, like, no one actually cares if you
ride it. Exactly.
Like, it's so cool to hear that coming from someone like Geordie. It's like, like do it if you want. But if you don't,
and like you watch some of his videos in the past and stuff, and like that dude's a madman, and like full respect to him. But then like to hear him say that is like even more respectful, to be like, you don't actually have to be insane to ride for fun. If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like mountain biking doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
That kind of leads into another question I wanted to ask you. I always like asking people for their experience around emotions like fear, doubt, and hesitation. How have those ones played out for you in your mountain biking ride?
So my partner and housemates are going to love this, because I live with 3 females, and they always talk about how my emotions are so level. And I always joke that I'm a +2, -2 guy.
Okay.
And then there's like a range of +10, -10. And I think like it's unnatural not to have fear. It's unnatural not to have anxiety. And I think like anybody that's like, oh, I don't have fear in this, is either lying or there's something crazy going on in their head.
It can be a dangerous place to be. Like,
yeah, exactly. I think it's very healthy to have all of those. And I think it's also very healthy to admit to having those, and like being open to being able to, like, I don't even know how to explain it other than, just being able to go, I don't feel good on this, or being able to walk away from something that maybe somebody else has done, or there's pressure from yourself or whoever to do it, and be like, this isn't going to do anything more for me other than a bragging right. And then go from there. So I think it's like healthy to respect those emotions.
Totally. Yeah, often they're there as a warning sign that something isn't quite right.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe you got out of bed on the wrong side, or something isn't lining up on that particular day. And if it's not, like, don't push yourself to do it, because that's usually when it goes wrong.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. If we're not feeling it, don't do it. It goes back to that. And for you, how do you or do you have a bit of a checklist that will help you kind of guide, yes, I can do this. I just need to get into the right headspace. I'm going to do it. Or like, no, I'm going to listen to my intuition and not do it, even though there's no clear reason for me not to do it today that you can.
I don't know off the top of my head. I think, like, once again, it's just listening to your body, understanding it. If you feel confident, like a perfect example is, like, say, crabapple hits at Whistler. They're massive jumps.
Yeah.
Like, to put it politely, they're pretty big jumps. And it's like, I know physically I'm capable of doing them, but every year I turn up and I have to go look at them, walk through it, watch somebody hit them. And it's just like, once again, that preparation that you go into, and it's sort of like, okay, I've looked at them. They looked like they were last year. I've watched somebody do it. They're either pedaling here or they're not pedaling here, or they've gone this far off this jump, or whatever it may be. So there's like all these different, as you say, I guess, checkpoints, but I think it just differs for different things.
Yeah.
I think just knowing your capability and knowing when to pull out is
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy way to answer that.
No, there's not. It's a difficult question. That's why I like to ask it. I think that's a great answer. I think it goes back to, like you're saying there, the preparation. That's your checklist each time. And I like your point there of, like, even though you've hit them before, each time you'll kind of see, okay, how's it running today? How's the wind? Where are people pedaling?
Yeah.
You check in it each time, and then you're listening to your intuition. So I think that kind of switch comes with experience, and maybe to your point before, of putting yourself in controlled, stressful situations.
Yeah, exactly.
To use your words, so that you can trust your own judgment, your own choices there. It's fantastic. And I'm curious, this can be, at any time throughout your mountain biking career, but what's been one of your biggest challenges on the bike?
I don't know. And the reason for that is I think I attack everything as best as possible.
Fantastic.
I think probably one of the biggest challenges was I dislocated my hip for a second time on a mountain bike, which completely medically had zero to do with the first time. It was just an uncanny crash that I had. And I was on crutches for 3 months, and then, like, coming back, I had really bad drop foot, which, if anyone understands what that is, it's you can't lift your toes up, like flex them up. And then, like, all the physio and just, like, rebuilding myself from being sort of a top 10 guy for marathon cross country in Australia back to that again. So, like, almost, I think I was off the bike for 4 months, and for the best part of 3 months, I was sitting around on a couch. So you just lose so much in that sense, in the way of fitness and all of that. So I'd say that was probably one of the biggest things. But
Totally.
I don't know, like, I feel like it's such a hard thing that the challenge or anything like that, there's just, every time there's a challenge, you try and work through it. And it's like that problem solving of what the issue is. And once you get through it, then you know how to try and do it again
Totally.
and go from there.
Yeah, it's that thing, isn't it? Like, once we get through that one challenge, we think we're done, but nope,
Yeah,
there's
there's
always going
another
to be
one.
another challenge.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks for digging into your crash there. I'm sure it was equally hard mentally, like that time on the couch, thinking about, like, am I going to be a top 10 racer again?
Yeah, and that's definitely a thing. And, like, to be honest, I think the hardest thing mentally is when you don't know why you crashed. Because if you know why you crashed, you can go back and analyze why you did it, or what happened, or how something broke, or what was the cause of it. And then you can once again, like, problem solve on how to fix that and not have that happen again.
Totally.
But if something freak happens and you don't know how to fix that, then that's pretty scary, because you're like, did I need to go faster in that section, or did I need to go slower, or was I on the wrong line? Or like, there's so many things like that where you're like, I don't know what went wrong, so I don't know how to fix it. And I think that's probably more of a challenge than being able to look back and resolve something or.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's always so good to get like back into an objective mindset where we're like, oh, X went wrong, I can change X next time, I'm in control, I know I can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you say there, if we don't know what went wrong, we don't know what we need to change.
Yeah.
We're going to go into it with some more unknowns next time. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just human nature of like, well, especially with my personality, is like, I want to dive into, if something went wrong, dive into why it went wrong and then try and fix it and make it better for the next time.
Totally. And I think that can be, well, that's where it can be really helpful to go and find someone that's done it successfully. And be like,
Yeah.
what line do you take down here? Or like,
Yeah,
can you watch me down here? Can you film me? Let's look at my body position. Let's look at my braking points
for sure.
and find something that you need to change. That's great. And it kind of leads right into another question I wanted to ask you. And that's, if you have any little crashes or little setbacks these days, is there anything you're doing to help minimize any mental blocks or, issues around that particular feature or that particular style of trail?
Yeah, I think just like, once again, like trying to work through the reason why I crashed. So it could be as simple as like sliding out in a turn, or it could be as simple as like misreading the trail and, well, maybe not simple, but like more advanced of misreading a trail and like just getting it completely wrong and crashing from there. So I think just like understanding why you crashed and allowing yourself the time to sit and review it. I think people that try and put it behind them and forget about it is unhealthy, in the sense of like, you're not allowing yourself to build on that error.
Totally. There is a bit of a trend, and maybe it's a bit of an old school take on mountain biking, but like if you have a crash, like get back up, do it straight away again so that you don't get a mental block. But I like what you're saying now. Like if we get back up and do it again the exact same way,
possibly you're going to have to
crash again, and we get like this compound crash in.
Yeah, and that
only gets worse.
Like I still agree with like, if you fall off the horse, get back on it. But that saying is only 5 words long.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of allow for time to recover, review, and that may only be a 30-second window, or it may be a week window.
Totally.
Or it may be even longer for some people, who knows, like, but just being able to understand why you crashed or how you crashed and be okay with that is one thing. And then evaluating whether it's worth trying to redo that.
Totally.
It may not, the risk versus reward may not be there.
Yeah, so it's just extending that timeline a little bit more depending on the situation.
For sure.
That. And another kind of common bit of advice that gets thrown around in the mountain biking world is like, oh man, you've got to learn to crash. So I'm curious for your perspective on this one as a coach. When someone's starting out in mountain biking, are you telling them like, oh yeah, you should definitely learn how to crash, or are you maybe teaching them techniques so that they don't fall in the first place?
No, I think like falling is part of mountain biking. And like that old saying of like, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough, I think is a bit of a funny one. Yeah. But yeah, like there's been tons of techniques and I guess exercises you can do. So one that I've done with a lot of like skills camps and stuff is you get a big grassy hill, you get a bunch of cardboard squares, and then you get the kids or whoever it is to come in as fast as they can go and try and skid on the cardboard. And it's like you're on ice. Like you crash very quickly. But the idea is that you're going at speed that may be a little slower than trail speed. You're on a big grass hill, so you're going to probably roll out of it. But it also gives you that control of being on an unstable bike. So there's all these different things of like learning how to control a bike when it's out of control. But then if it's too far out of control, how do you crash and stop the bike? Like, how do you turn that bike into the ground so it's not going to be a violent crash, I guess is the best way to describe it, and learn how to roll out of that. And like you put on an old set of clothes and go from there. And
totally,
I do believe that like you watch the guys in like jiu-jitsu and all of those MMA stuff, like they get thrown on the ground pretty hard, but they seem to be able to roll out of it. And that's where I think a crash gets scary versus a little bit more sort of mentally easier is if you land and splat versus if you land and roll. So if you can land and roll out of a crash, the risk of injury, I think, drops.
Totally.
Versus if you land and stop dead, like that's usually where it is. And like you hear the joke about speed doesn't kill people, stopping instantly does.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like speed is obviously the cause, but it's the stopping instantly is what hurts. So
yeah, and it's amazing. Like when we watch, high level riders, like someone like Geordie or the guys competing in joyrides, girls as well. When they crash, they don't stop. They keep running down the down ramp, and it's like, holy crap, how did they get out of that? But it goes back to what you're saying there. So that's a cool exercise you do with the kids, like a good controlled way of crashing. And it probably takes away some of the anxiety about crashing in the first place. So then maybe they're crashing less.
Especially like a perfect example is like the people that are clipped in. Like they're so scared of not being able to clip out when they crash. It's a once again a controlled, stressful environment to learn how to fall. And like I've been lucky that no one's hurt themselves, but they could be.
Totally.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? I get that one with riders a lot as well when they're trying out clips for the first time. And something I always love to do is find somewhere like this park that we're filming in that has lots of trees. It's nice and grassy, nice and flat.
Yeah.
And I'll put a cone out like 2 meters before the tree and say, right, you're going to stop there and unclip.
Yeah.
But if for some reason you can't unclip, keep rolling forward and touch the tree.
Hold on to the tree,
and like 9 times out of 10, they're going to unclip just before the tree and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But we're taking away some of the unknowns and it's also grassy next to it.
Yeah, exactly.
They happen to do it. So it's like learn how to unclip before you're on the trails. And that way you're not freaking about trying to get out of your pedals when you're on a trail that challenges you.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff, man. And I wanted to ask you, like, you've got a lot of years of riding experience, a lot of years of coaching and racing under your belt now, but if you ever experience off days mentally, what does your self-talk look like these days? And what are you saying to yourself there?
Like now it's like allowing myself to rest. When I was training full time, it was different because there was a lot of numbers and science behind how mentally tired versus how physically tired I was. And I think like if you can follow a training program to like 85, 90%, you're probably going to get majority of the training benefit out of it. So missing that 10% of the training isn't the worst in the world unless you're maybe training for a world title. But these days it's sort of like, if I'm not feeling it or if I'm, I don't know. I use like road cycling a lot as a head clearer, even if it's only a 45-minute ride, just go for a cruise. Like I'm not putting out any high intensity, but I think, and I think it's been scientifically proven that like physical exercise helps with mental sort of stress. So whether you put on a podcast or some music or something to listen to and just like zone out from the real world. I think like mentally bad days, even going for a walk, like just getting outside in the open air, whether it's winter or summer, like sun out, raining, whatever.
Totally.
Like you hear about the runners talk about running highs. And I think you can get that from most exercise.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing. So
yeah,
it's
great advice. Yeah, just get moving.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was. Someone mentioned on this podcast, like emotion is energy in motion. So if
sure.
we've got an emotion that we want to move through, that we want to move through us, it's like, get moving.
Yeah, and that's
be a walk, a ride, a road bike.
I've not heard that before, but same thing. Like one of my coaches used to say, if you don't feel like riding, make that decision 5 minutes into the ride. Because I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, if you're 5 minutes into the ride, you're going to continue riding versus turn around and come home.
Totally.
And if you still want to come home after riding for 5 minutes, then it's probably good to come home and go back to bed.
Yeah, I like that saying. Often for me, I'll like maybe not necessarily like turn around and go home, but I'll change plans. I might get like 5 minutes up the climb train. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm really not feeling that good today. I'm just gonna ride something chill.
Yeah, exactly. And goes back to what we're saying, like, you don't always have to be riding the gnarliest technical trail to have fun.
Exactly.
Like, we just rode Emperor's Bypass, which I think is a green trail.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the funnest trails on the North Shore.
Totally. That was one of the funnest parts of our ride today.
Yeah.
Let's come down like a double black trail.
So yeah, as I say, I think like just listening to your body,
Mm.
and some days maybe you don't need to force yourself to go out, and other days even just going for a half an hour walk is enough to clear your head.
Totally, man. Yeah, really wise words there.
Yeah.
I wanted to, before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the coaching you're doing these days here on the North Shore.
Yep.
You've got your own business called Dynamic Cycling Academy,
Yeah.
and you're also working with the DEVO Kids Race Team. Can you tell us
For
a little
sure.
bit about that?
Yeah. So the Dynamic Cycling Academy definitely taken not so much a backseat, but like it's a lower priority these days. So it's still coaching, and anybody that wants some form of coaching, any level, whether it's like, kids all the way through to seniors. I'm happy to coach and help and all of that, but I'm not really pushing it anywhere near the way I pushed it in Australia.
Okay.
And then, with the DEVO kids, it's that same thing. It's like, I feel very rewarded when you see, or when you can help one of the kids succeed. So like a few of the kids I'm working with are like BC level athletes. A couple of them have got national level titles. Like there's a bunch of kids that I've worked with through DEVO that have now gone on to do big things. And it's pretty rewarding in that sense. And
That's fantastic, man.
yeah.
And what's one of the biggest things you find yourself kind of teaching, or biggest bits of advice that you're giving to these kids?
Just how to relax. And I think with these kids, a lot of them, I'm lucky enough to be with more of the advanced groups, and some of the older kids. So sort of 14 to 17, I guess is the range. They're all very capable riders. So it's more getting them to understand why they do what they do. So it might be that we're climbing a technical climb, and then asking them how they did it, or asking them why they slid further forwards on the saddle, or what the reason for the gear choice was, or something like that, that makes them think about it. So then when they get to another section of trail that they may never have ridden, they're like, okay, I can see this feature, and this feature, which is very similar to Trail X. I now know what I need to do to break that apart. So it's like getting them to understand those skills, I think, is the big thing for that level.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So they're already really good riders. They've already got really good skills, but you're almost just like bringing those skills to the front of their mind so that practice is more purposeful.
For sure. Yeah. So like I break it back down to like, you can go put cones on a grass and turn through the cones, and it doesn't matter what level of rider it is, you can make sort of the rider better from that.
Totally.
So there's all of those things that you can just break down and, as you say, bring it to the front of their mind so they're thinking about that.
Fantastic. So we're going to start winding things down in just a second here so that you can go and rest up before your next ride today. But I wanted to ask there, just on the idea of coaching, when you're working with these young riders, these racers, how do you go about setting goals with them?
I think that's very like personal, depending on the person, like depending on each rider and athlete and what level they're at and what they determine as something they want to achieve. So it's just breaking all of that down and pinpointing certain things. And I think I said it earlier, it's like a win could be anything from first place through to last place, as long as they've achieved what their goal is. And it's just like setting realistic goals. Like, I know tomorrow I'm not going to go out and win a world title, but I can go out and achieve X. And it's just making sure that what the goal is a reach, but a close enough reach that it can be achieved. Yeah, I don't know. It's so independent of the rider and what they're wanting to achieve. And it may be that they just want to be able to get from the top of Trail X to the bottom without putting a foot down.
Yeah.
And that's a win. And
Totally.
that's a goal that's achievable. Or it may be that they want to go and win and represent BC. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different things, but it just, depends on what they want from their riding and their whether it's a career or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Like where that motivation's coming from.
Yeah.
I love that idea of, making sure it's achievable as well.
Yeah.
I
And I
know.
think, like it definitely needs to be a reach, because if all of a sudden you can do it instantly, I don't think it's really a goal that needs to be set.
Yeah, it's not going to be
But-
very fun for us to go and chase if it's
Yeah.
too easily attainable.
Yeah. So there needs
Sure.
to be a reach of some description to get to that point. But you also don't want to put it out of reach and then you're chasing it for years.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of like our goal should stretch us, but
Yeah.
maybe not stress us.
Yeah. And then I guess like there's a difference as well. Like there may be stepping stones to that goal. So it may be that one day you want to be a world champion, but what are those stepping stones to get to that point?
Totally.
Is it that you need to then go and win like a provincial title, and then from that you aim to winning nationally,
Yeah.
and then from that you work out what you need to do to get into the world circuit and so on. And
I like that. Yeah, going back to like, what do I need to do? Breaking it down into smaller steps.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Man, that's fantastic. Really, really wise advice there. I've loved this conversation. Couple of kind of open-ended questions to finish off here. I wanted to ask you, is there anyone that you look up to in the mountain biking world?
In the mountain biking world, I think there's a lot of different guys. Obviously, Sam Hill is a big guy that I've always looked up to.
That's fantastic. What about Sam in particular?
Sam's always been that sort of quietly confident person. And I think in his heyday of downhill, he'll always come off a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but like just quiet and not wanting to talk to anyone, almost elitist, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that's just his personality. Like he knew what the line was, how he was going to ride it, and he didn't need to ask questions. And I think like that is so cool to be able to just like be confident, but not rub it in everyone's face. Like as much as I respect and love Sean Palmer, like standing at the bottom of the downhill track, giving Vulios the finger because he beat him, like as much as that's pretty badass, I don't have that personality.
Yeah.
Maybe when I have a few beers, I get that way. But generally speaking, I try and stay as humble as possible. And I think Sam's much like that.
Yeah.
And then like Jarrad Graves is the other guy. That guy is a beast. And I've been lucky enough to like ride and stay and race with Jarrad enough times. And everything he does is to the maximum of his ability. Whether it's like racing downhill, racing full cross, racing cross country. He was Queensland state road champion at one stage. Like the dude is an absolute animal, and his ability to transition from all of these different disciplines and still stay at the top. Like he turned up and raced enduro and won an enduro world title, and it's like he's pretty much won everything. He raced in the Olympics, like the top 8 in the Olympics, you know, like
unreal, eh?
So I think like his ability to like transition and always be finding that next thing that's going to drive him to continue riding bikes. And like anybody that knows me, it's like when you ask what bike I ride, I'm like anything I can get my hands on.
Such a good
And
answer.
it's like I don't care whether I'm racing at the track, in the velodrome, racing cross country, racing, or I should just be saying riding, to be honest, but like literally any form of riding, I'm down to go and do. So I think it's just like such a cool thing to watch him be able to do and be able to relate to that of some degree.
Totally, man. Yeah, such a cool person to look up to.
Yeah.
Man, this has been such a fantastic chat. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for taking the time to come for a ride with me and then sit down in the park here and have a chat today.
Yeah, no problems.
If there's one thing you hope listeners learn or remember from this conversation, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing is, two things. One, if you can have a good relationship with your parents and get a respectful relationship with your parents, I think that's made my life very open and good, and my conversation with them is so good. I can literally tell them about anything in my life, whether it's, you name a topic and we've talked about it. And I think that just gives me such a good area to be able to bounce ideas off and have that. And they've supported me in so many different things. So giving that respect back and understanding what they've gone through and sacrificed for you as a child to be able to succeed in life, I think is a big thing. And then getting out there and riding your bike because you can ride your bike. So one of the sayings I heard was, you don't have to do it, you get to do it. There's many people out there that don't have the ability to ride a bike or don't have the ability to even own a bike.
Totally.
So you get to do this, you don't have to do it, so go and enjoy it. So I think is the two big key factors for me.
Yeah, man, that's fantastic. Ending it with gratitude. I love it.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much. Best of luck for the 5er tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure it'll be a blast.
It will be. It will
I'll
be.
see you on the trails again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Cheers.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or any particular episodes that you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very close to my heart. So I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. So much love to you all for taking the time to listen. I'll see you next time.